talked to Cliff not too long ago, and he was really excited about this ceremony and about being here with us this evening. So I just want you to know that Cliff promised me he was going to be here, and he's here.
Yes, he is.
Cliff never made a promise he didn't keep. Again, I want to thank you all for being out here this evening. This is an important function for our organization. It gives us an opportunity to recognize those, typically in the real estate industry, who have made significant contributions to the arena and to the issue of fair housing. And while Cliff may not have been a typical member of the real estate industry, he was certainly someone who had a significant impact on the real estate industry. And your presence here and your support of Cliff and your support of the Fair Housing Center is a tribute to the work and effort, the lifelong effort of Cliff Schrupp. So again, I want to thank you for that. I'm going to conclude those as my opening remarks because there's really not much more that can be said at this point in time. I'm here representing the Fair Housing Center staff and board of directors, and so I would like the Fair Housing Center staff and board of directors to stand and be recognized at this point because they have also been the backbone that helped support Cliff through all of these efforts. So could the staff and board please stand, raise your hand. And if you haven't done so, at the end of the ceremony this evening, there's still time for dialogue and having some personal encounters. And so please take the time and talk to the staff, talk to a board member. We need your support right now. Cliff was always a stickler about making certain that the meeting got started on time, and I violated that rule already this evening. But he was a stickler for making certain that we got an opportunity to spend time with each other, and so they didn't want long drawn-out ceremonies and long drawn-out speeches. We may violate that rule a little bit this evening. But I want to get to the agenda. The first item on the agenda is the presentation of the Marvin Thomas Service Award. Marv Thomas was the first coordinator of testing for the Fair Housing Center, and he left a real mark on our organization. He and Cliff struggled together to develop the testing training package that has been recognized. It's been recognized in court decisions as being one that develops reliable, honest, and trustworthy testing results. It was recognized by the Urban Institute and modeled after, and was modeled by the Urban Institute after it was developed. And it's a legacy it's a legacy that we continue to honor. Marv just did a marvelous job of finding, training, and recruiting people so that we had the best fair housing testers in the country. And so it's only appropriate that we have an opportunity to honor those fair housing testers. Now typically we can't say, hey, I'm a fair housing tester, because that sort of blows the cover, right? So we're only able to do that at a time when, after long years of service, these fair housing testers have had an opportunity to retire. So I want to ask Al Young, the current coordinator of testing for the Fair Housing Center, to come up to make the award to this year's Marvin Thomas Service Awardee. Al?
Good evening. I was teasing everyone and I was saying that. I was teasing, okay, there we go. I was teasing everyone and I was saying that I was gonna see if I could talk about everyone at the table, at least one person at the table, to make it lighter this evening, but my job is very, very, very easy. It's to present the Marvin Thomas Service Award. The Marvin Thomas Service Award is given to an outstanding tester. One of the requirements of that tester is that the tester no longer tests for the Fair Housing Center. Well, today we're going to give this award to Sandra Clemons, a native Detroiter, but she resides now in North Carolina. One asks, what is a tester? I'm glad you asked. A tester is an actor or an actress playing the role of a home seeker. The tester has to be flexible, trained, objective, reliable, and a credible witness, and an accurate recorder of events. Well, when it comes to a tester in my book, tester has to have a great penmanship because we have to read those reports. And Sandra has one of the best penmanships, an excellent penmanship. But what makes Sandra stand alone is her commitment to the cause. That commitment drove Sandra into a cold office for 1 day a week for a year after being summoned by Cliff. A cold office where coats, hats, and gloves was a requirement to work. Her commitment to the cause is what drove Sandra across the metropolitan area testing. Her commitment to the cause drove her to depart from her hard-earned money, cold, hard cash, to see the need of the Fair Housing Center of metropolitan Detroit. Cliff said it best, Sandra must really love us. Even from North Carolina, her checks was always on time. Well, that makes my little speech very, very short. We are so thankful that we have Sandra L. Clemons for believing not in just the Fair Housing Center, but believing in the cause. I present my sister, my friend, Sandra L. Clemons.
I knew this would be hard for me, so I'm like the rest of the world is smart, I wrote it down. It's been a privilege to have had the opportunity to work with people like Cliff. There were many people in his generation, including Mike Olson and Marvin Thomas, who fought for others and ignored themselves. And I think anyone that knows them know that they have definitely said that the priority in their life was this housing. I was fortunate to be able to observe and learn from these great people. And I miss them. that I should not only take advantage of their accomplishments, but I must also contribute and help others. The importance of fair housing severely influences the stability and well-being of individuals and families. In this country, its value cannot be measured. Our homes not only contribute to one's financial security, but where we live contributes to a profile or stereotype that classifies an individual or a group's value to society. Our country's most recent financial crisis not only highlighted the inequity between property values in many urban and suburban areas, it also served as a reminder that where you live determines your access to retail, medical, private, and public resources. Several times when I participated in fair housing testing, I was dismayed to be told that a home or rental unit was not available to me when it was available to my testing partner. No matter how many times this happened, it hurt. No matter what my expectations were, it hurt. Cliff taught me compassion and patience. He consistently told me we cannot give up because there will always be barriers that we must overcome. The opportunity to live in decent housing is a freedom we should all be entitled to. Because if we all live together, maybe we can learn to respect each other. Thank you for recognizing my effort to the Fair Housing Center of Metro Detroit. I'm so sorry that Cliff is not here, because it was because of him that he pushed me to come from North Carolina for this. And he wrote on a little card, I think in July, it said, "I'm looking for you, don't break your promise." We will all. Thank you so much.
We've had that ability to inspire and lead and bring out the best in all of us and bring us here from North Carolina. And Sandra, we thank you for being here with us this evening. You know, one of the last times I talked to Cliff, he was really excited. He said, you know, well, Brett Freiberg's coming all the way from New York to be at this awards ceremony. You have to make certain he speaks. I said, okay, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. You know, whatever you say, it's going to happen. You know. Cliff was excited about having Fred here because Fred, like Cliff, is the director of the Fair Housing Justice Center in New York. Fred, like Cliff, had worked at the Urban Institute. Fred, like Cliff, had struggled for many years. And Fred, like Cliff, although to a lesser extent, was a nationally known leader in civil rights and fair housing. Cliff says Fred was more significant, but that's Cliff. He always tried to downplay himself. But we are really honored to have Fred with us here this evening. And Fred, I know Cliff really wanted to see you and talk to you and be here with you this evening. But I would like you to come up and to make the presentation of the Lifetime Leadership Award to Clifford Schrupp. Fred Freiberg.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit for inviting me to be part of this very special evening. My remarks are going to be very brief. I want to begin by extending my deepest personal sympathy to the family members and close friends of Cliff Schrupp. And for those of you in Cliff's extended family, and you know what I mean by that, the community of fair housing and civil rights advocates and supporters, in Greater Detroit, throughout my home state of Michigan, and indeed across the nation. I share your heartfelt sorrow and grief over the loss of this extraordinary human being. If Cliff had been here this evening, there's a story he would not have told you. So I'm going to tell it. He would not tell you that 36 years ago, he met a 24-year-old college dropout who was working as a community organizer in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This young man, while brimming with idealism and eager to learn, had little experience in the field of civil rights, and his knowledge of fair housing was much more textbook than real world. Cliff would be too kind to point out that this boy was a bit naive and rudderless, to put it mildly. And above all, Cliff would be too modest to tell you that he generously and frequently made himself available as a mentor to this young man throughout his entire career, guiding him with sage counsel, challenging him at every turn, critiquing his work, providing him with ideas and resources, and always treating him with dignity and respect, even when the man showed youthful impertinence, impulsiveness, and sometimes questionable judgment. As you probably surmised, I was that young man. Indeed, Cliff had just founded the Fair Housing Center here in Detroit when I began organizing the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council back in 1977. Over the years, Cliff and I worked on many fair housing investigations and projects and attended numerous meetings and conferences together. As years passed, even though he warmly embraced me as a friend and colleague, in truth, he always remained my teacher, and I was his student. Like so many people in the fair housing movement across this nation, I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Cliff Schrupp for his invaluable guidance, unwavering dedication, steadfast leadership, unparalleled integrity, and as all of you know all too well, tireless work on behalf of fair housing. We have much to celebrate tonight, as Cliff Schrupp left us a most impressive personal legacy as a civil rights leader. His exemplary record of accomplishment for fair housing and justice is only overshadowed by the humility he demonstrated throughout his life. While never claiming to possess all of the answers, one of his most admirable qualities, Cliff was always ready to share his convictions with courage, intelligence, and strength, often using that infectious laugh that I'm sure all of you have heard, and piercing wit to make his points. Even on those rare occasions when I disagreed with his advice, I always respected his viewpoint and learned so much from our robust exchanges. What you may not know is that at the national level, Cliff was frequently the one person in the room who would quietly listen to all of the discussions and debates on housing policies, enforcement approaches, litigation strategies, and then calmly and perceptively proclaim why certain seemingly reasonable positions were manifestly unjust, ineffective, or just plain dumb. He had a knack for quickly getting to the heart of matters. For many of us, he embodied the spirit and the conscience of the fair housing movement. I don't have to tell you that Cliff was uncompromising in his commitment to keep the poison of racism and housing discrimination in all of its hideous forms from infecting our communities, from dividing us, from harming individuals, families, and entire neighborhoods. But it wasn't enough for him to concentrate his fair housing work in Detroit, the community he so loved. No, not Cliff. Through this organization, Cliff set out to incubate fair housing centers all across the state of Michigan. But his efforts did not stop at the state line. Cliff unselfishly provided assistance to dozens of fair housing organizations all around the country. And in fact, his impact on the fair housing movement has been so far-reaching that it is truly difficult to measure. My thoughts are somewhat clouded tonight by the grief and pain that I feel. But I leave you with these familiar words. Quote, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." Those were the words of abolitionist Theodore Parker that were later popularized by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But I would hasten to add, my friends, that the moral universe bends towards justice only because your actions, our collective actions, and the lives of people like Cliff Schrupp move it forward in that direction. One thing I know Cliff would say if he was here tonight is that our work is not finished. While progress has been made, housing discrimination remains a persistent, pervasive, and destructive force in our nation. I believe the best way we can celebrate the life of Cliff Schrupp and truly honor his work is to vow to redouble our efforts and continue this struggle for justice, to build on the solid foundation that he laid, to rededicate ourselves to the civil rights agenda that he so passionately worked to advance, to come together in the richness of our diversity, but united in common purpose and spirit, to work for fair housing, and to inspire others, as no doubt Cliff inspired us to do the same. Thank you, Cliff Schrupp, and thanks to all of you.
Cliff's brother Lowell, Cliff's son Mark, Cliff's daughter Laura, to please come up and accept this award on behalf of your father and your brother.
Sharing our dad with us. He did spend a lot of time with you all, but we certainly got a good share of him ourselves. He was a great dad, and he never let us suffer, even though he put in many, many hours with the Fair Housing Center. He used to say that the mission of his organization was to put itself out of business, and I wish we could say we were there, but he would say we're still not there yet, so keep pushing on, doing the good work, and fighting for justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You can see that the desire for brevity runs in the family. At this time, I'd like we've received a number of resolutions in support and in honor of Cliff, and I would like to first call for the first presentation. We have with us this evening City Councilman Ken Cockrell. Ken was a former member of our Fair Housing Center Board of Directors. When he got elected to City Council, we reluctantly said, well, maybe there's a conflict here. So, how would you like to serve on our advisory board? And so Ken continues to serve and work with us on the Fair Housing Center Advisory Board. Councilman Cockrell?
Thank you very much, Noel, for that introduction. Good evening. Good evening. I want to begin first by extending my deepest sympathies and sympathies not only of my family, but also on behalf of the Detroit City Council to the family and, yes, the extended Fair Housing Center family of Clifford Schrupp. As Noel indicated, I was actually asked to join the board of directors for the Fair Housing Center. It seems like 1,000 years or so ago, but it was probably back in the early 1990s, and at that time I was working for the Center for Urban Studies at Wayne State University, and I was actually approached about coming aboard the board of directors by a mutual friend of Cliff's and mine, and subsequent to that approach, I remember sitting down with him and discussing it a little bit, and after that I was invited to a board meeting shortly thereafter and was voted onto the board and served for a number of years, and also actually did a little bit of testing as well for the Fair Housing Center. And then when I started running for political office, before I got involved in city council politics, I was actually a county commissioner. And once I ran for Wayne County Commissioner, my profile started to get kind of high, and it became counterproductive for me to be out there testing, because people would be, well, what's this all about when you walk into a rental or leasing office? So I stopped doing that, but continued on the board. But I had plenty of years of experience with Cliff, and you know, the one thing that I will always say about him and always remember about him is he was definitely proof positive that appearances can be deceiving, because Cliff was very quiet, you know, very soft-spoken, kind of bookish, but you could never let that fool you, because there was a quiet strength about him that was undeniable. There was a fierce determination about him that when he set himself about getting something done, it was going to get done. You could take that to the bank. And there was also an overwhelming sense of love for community and a true desire to want to make the world a better place. I will always carry that with me. I will always remember that about him. And I think that's something that we will always remember. As Noel said at the outset of this meeting, he is here. He is with us. And yes, indeed, as was mentioned, the work is not done. Now, many of you may have noticed when I came in, I got a little guy with me. That's actually my youngest son, Kyle, who is a third grader at Chrysler Elementary. And he's on the school chess team, and he had practice till 5:45. My original plan was actually to run, pick him up, run home, drop him off, and then come here. And then I realized that just wasn't going to work, because it would have put me too far behind schedule. But I think in many respects, it's actually good that he is here with us, because he serves as a stark reminder that it's that generation, that this generation and the generations before us that are still around have to continue to work for. Because the work isn't, as has been said. It would be very easy to say, for example, we got a brother in the White House. There's no discrimination. Why is there a need for a fair housing center? And of course, everybody here knows that is not true. It's probably in some respects needed more than ever, because it seems like these days you cannot turn on the television news or pick up a newspaper without reading about some case of somebody being discriminated against somewhere, someone being racially profiled, somebody shot in circumstances just because of how they look, or because of what language they speak, or because of how they gender identify themselves, or because of what their sexual orientation may be. Racial profiling, racial discriminating seems to be more alive than ever. And that means we have to be more alive and more vigorous than ever. I think that's the lesson that Cliff would want us to keep at heart. So with that in mind, I do want to present, and this is tough, because originally the plan was to present a testimonial resolution to Cliff in recognition of all the great work that he's done. Instead, what we're now presenting is this resolution in memoriam. And I would like to ask whichever members of the family that would like to come forward and accept this on his behalf. But this is a resolution in memoriam, and it's signed by all members of the Detroit City Council. I'm not going to read the text in its entirety in the interest of time, but I will just say that it says that now therefore be it resolved that the Detroit City Council expresses its deepest sympathy in the passing of Clifford C. Schrupp. May the memories of his love, faith, and hard work be cherished always and continue to fill the hearts of the many that loved him and were inspired by him. Mark?
we've received a number of other resolutions from various public officials and dignitaries that unfortunately could not be here this evening, and I'm not going to bother reading them out other than to just acknowledge the ones that we did receive. We did receive a letter from U.S. Congressman John Conyers. This, like Councilman Cockle's original understanding, was one that was congratulating Cliff on his 36 years of dedicated service and the work of the Fair Housing Center. And I know that over the years we've worked closely with Congressman Conyers' office, and he was a good friend, he was a good supporter, and we thank him for his support. We also received a certificate of recognition from Mayor David Bing from the city of Detroit. Again, in recognition and congratulation of Cliff's occasion of his retirement. We have from the state of Michigan, the state senator, the Honorable Coleman Young, Coleman Young III, or second, his junior. It's just a statement letting it be known in the honor of Cliff Schrupp. We have a resolution honoring Cliff Schrupp from the county of Wayne, and issued at the request of Burton Leland. And we also have a resolution that's not here this evening. I was supposed to go pick it up on my way here and got lost. But it was a resolution from the State of Michigan House of Representatives issued by the Honorable Rashida Tlaib. I had an opportunity to meet one member of the Fair Housing Center staff, but I'd like to ask Mike Olshan and James Stevenson. Mike is our legal services coordinator. James is our coordinator of mortgage lending testing, and they, on behalf of the staff, would like to make a presentation to Cliff and his family. Mike, James.
This is for the family.
He'll hear you.
You gotta use the mic. Mike.
Gift to the family.
And I would just like to say to Laura, to Mark, and to Chris, your father, you read and you hear so many things about the work that your father did. But as a staff member, I came into the Fair Housing Center as a complainant. I was being discriminated as a young 23-year-old black male, and I went to 30 or 40 different attorneys, and everybody turned me down, said there was nothing you could do. I had crap for a case, with lawyers call it, no testing evidence. When I came to the Fair Housing Center said there wasn't enough evidence to go any further. But your father looked me in the eye. He said, "I believe you, young man." He didn't have any evidence other than my words and my perseverance to go forward. He said, "I'm going to help." We won the first mortgage discrimination case in the state of Michigan. That's the kind of man that he was. He treated his staff so well and so good. He didn't even seem like a boss to us. He was a friend, he was a father, he was a mentor. I worked for the federal government for 30 years, and we give parties when our boss leaves. We're so glad to do it. With your father, it was, we never wanted anything else but him. We cared for him just that deeply. And he was just a great man. Can't say enough about it. God bless you and your family.
I've never let one of these events pass without messing up a little bit. Somewhere along the line, sometimes it's notable, sometimes it's not. This time it'll be noticeable, so I have to acknowledge it up front. We also received, and this is really significant, because as you all know, the Fair Housing Center started out by suing real estate agencies. And, for the last 16 years, we've been honoring members of the real estate industry for their efforts. And the Michigan Association of Realtors and its 23,000 members have made a presentation to Clifford Schrupp, celebrated as a true champion for equal housing opportunity at both the state and national level. Clint set a powerful standard of dedicated service so that the American dream of home ownership might be available to all. And I would be so remiss if I didn't read that in its entirety. And on behalf of the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit, I want to thank the Michigan Association of Realtors for the relationship that we have now developed with all of you. And I know that Cliff really and truly appreciates the dialogue and the working relationship that we do now have. And some of it we won't even talk about because we can't talk about it, but you know what I'm talking about. So, thank you. One thing Cliff was adamant about, and that was, I don't get this work done without my staff. And if you don't ask my staff to stand up and be individually acknowledged, you're in trouble. So, Cliff, I remembered, I would really want you individually to be introduced to the Fair Housing Center staff. We're going to save the newest edition for last. It's Angela Bertolini. Angela? Angela is the coordinator of our systemic investigations. Tim Davis, the coordinator of computer services. Tanya Cofield, our program administrator. Tanya, where are you? Darlene Taylor, our administrative assistant. Darlene. Mike, James, and Al, we've been introduced to this evening. The next person I want to introduce is a person who is no stranger to the Fair Housing Center, but she's now here in a new role. Earlier this year when Cliff first took ill, and he informed us that it's time for me to take care of myself and my medical conditions. I have to take time off. I have to resign from my position. It's a little quicker and a little bit less coordinated than I would have liked, but I have no choice. He was in the hospital and he was seriously ill. And we, in the Fair Housing Center, and the board of directors, you know, we're in a difficult situation. A lot of you know that while Cliff was a hell of a organizer and a hell of an administrator, he was a terrible fundraiser. And so we struggled economically, financially in our organization. And we had, you know, there were issues that needed to be addressed, and we needed someone who could come in and assist us in a time of really turmoil. Not turmoil because our staff, you know, when first Cliff got sick, picked up the torch, they held up, they got things going, they kept things going. But we knew that if we were going to be able to sustain the Fair Housing Center and sustain the work that Cliff had begun and that we needed to get someone to come in and assist us in providing us with leadership to coordinate all of these efforts. We were fortunate that we had Margaret Brown on our board of directors. We were fortunate that Margaret had a memory lapse. She sort of forgot how hard it is to work all the time. She had been retired after an illustrious career with the state of Michigan, Michigan State Housing Development Authority. And she agreed, she said, okay, I'm willing to come in and help us through this transition so that we're in a position to make certain our organization is stable and to make certain that when we do start to look for a new executive director, our organization will be in the position to do that and try to get somebody who's half as qualified as Cliff. We think we have someone who is exceptionally qualified. And so for those of you who have not yet met Margaret, I want to introduce our new executive director, Margaret Brown, and I want Margaret to come up here.
But it wasn't meant to be. And at some point, when the board approached me and said, would you take your 10 to 15 hours a week that you were volunteering and turn it into a little bit more, I agreed. But I'm an accidental ED, and it is my goal to go back to the life I was living as soon as possible. But I am reminded that P and I have a shared vision, a shared goal, a shared commitment, and we often spoke about that on our various projects. We did have a lot of projects in the hopper, and I am determined that they will see the light of day. So that was one of the other reasons that I agreed to this. Today, when I was trying to get everything organized to come over here, I received this letter. And I read it, and it's from a former board member, and she sort of captured what I wanted to say, and so rather than trying to paraphrase and say some other words, I'm going to read her words because she sort of caught what I wanted to say. She says, this is from Catherine Harrison, and she says, to my Fair Housing Center friends, Cliff Schrupp's belief in and dedication to ensuring equal access to decent, affordable housing for all never wavered in the 40-plus years of our friendship. He made sacrifices seen and unseen to keep the Fair Housing Center's doors open, to give an aggressive grieved parties an able advocate to fight for their beliefs, for their basic civil rights, and for their ability to live where they please. The world was so much better with Cliff in it. He was a dear and gentle man with a steely resolve to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Still, Cliff was one of a kind, and he will be missed by all who knew and loved him, including me. I could it any better. He will be loved and missed by all, including me. I hope that you will continue your support of the Fair Housing Center. We very, very much need it. I hope that you will continue your resolve to fight the fight, because we very much need to continue to fight. And even though I'm a reluctant ED, I am a committed ED. And I encourage you to stand with us, continue to stand with us, comfort each other, share stories, and fellowship for the few minutes that we can be here before they cut off the lights. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
And we look forward to Margaret being the accidental executive director and being as productive as Lyndon Baines Johnson was in the arena of civil rights as our accidental executive director. That concludes our presentation this evening. But Taslima Bey and her trio are coming back to continue the entertainment. So please take this opportunity to continue to meet and greet, and enjoy the rest of the evening, enjoy the waterfront, the music, and our companionship in this evening. Again, we thank you for coming out, and we look forward to seeing you all next year for the 17th Annual Leadership Awards dinner. Thank you.